Happy Monday. Welcome, everyone. We are talking today in this Facebook live stream how to use podcast guesting to grow your speaking business. We have been meeting a lot of speakers, a lot of our clients at Interview Connections that we book on podcasts want to get more speaking engagements. A lot of people we talk to, their goal is to get speaking engagements. We just sponsored the National Speakers Association conference, so we met a lot of speakers there. So we wanted to do this Facebook Live to really speak to speakers and show you how podcast guesting can be a really helpful strategy to get speaking engagements and grow your speaking business. So I have a couple of guest experts in the first half of this live stream, and then I'm going to be delivering some tips from my friend Jacqueline Nagel, who's a speaker, trainer, mentor, advisor. She's in Australia, so she can't join live, but she sent me some of her tips through Facebook Messenger, so I cannot wait to share. So don't leave until we are officially over here. So first up, we have the amazing Nikki Nash. So Nikki, first, for those of our viewers here who haven't seen you on the previous couple live streams, please introduce yourself. And then we're going to talk about your tips for how you use podcast guesting to get speaking engagements.
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Nikki Nash, and I am the creator of the Market Your Genius brand, in which I have a book that came out almost a year ago, not quite yet, called Market Your Genius, as well as a podcast called Market Your Genius. And I really work to help experts in an area take their experiences and expertise and turn them into a profitable business.
Awesome. So you have, I think, top 3 tips on how you leverage podcast guesting to grow your business with speaking engagement. So talk a little bit about those tips.
Absolutely. And one of the things that is so important for folks that are trying to share their experiences, their knowledge and expertise with the world is to have access to the world, right? Have access to the people who would benefit most from their message. And speaking is an amazing way to do that. And the question then becomes, all right, how do I get speaking gigs? Now, there could be ultimate goals of being a part of, a big speaking bureau and getting paid to speak and all of that. But the biggest thing to know about landing speaking gigs is that you, especially if you want to make a career out of it, is that people want to know that you have experience speaking and that you have something to say. And what's beautiful is that experience speaking doesn't literally have to be, I was on stage with 1 million people before you can get on a stage with 1 million people, right? Like that could be hard. And so people love to hear that you're able to communicate your message clearly, that people can resonate with it and that people can understand. And so podcast guesting is an amazing way to do that because you're sharing what you know in such a way that someone else who's listening to you, that could metaphorically be in a stage, would be receiving that message. And you're proving to those that are booking speakers that you can share your message in such a way that it's going to add value to the people that they have in seats, right? And so that's I like to give people high level, if you want to get on stages, you have to show that you have something to say. And podcast guesting is a great way to do that. Now,
I love that. Yeah. I love that perspective shift too. It makes me think, a long time ago, my brother he was looking into being an electrician. And the only way to be an electrician is to, you've got to have experience. And he's like, well, how do you get experience? So there's sort of what comes first, the chicken or the egg? So in this case, if you want to be speaking on stages, but they want people who have experience speaking in order to, get you booked, podcast guesting provides that space for you to really practice. And that's one of Jacqueline's tips that I'll be sharing in a little bit. So I love that.
Yeah. And then folks may be going, okay, great, but I'm going to be a guest on podcasts. I get it. I'm on board. Now, how the heck do I get those speaking gigs? And so I shared with you, Jess, my top 3 tips, and I'm so excited to share with you guys watching. And the first one really comes from what, could be possibly most people's goal, right? And that could be, I'm going to be a guest on a podcast and somebody listening to that podcast is going to go, you are amazing, and then bring you on to speak, right? And that has happened, right? I have had someone reach out to me because they heard me on podcast. And I've had such a a variety of people reach out to me because they've heard me speak on podcasts. It could be because they have a summit or something coming up and they'd like me to be a guest. It could be because they just loved what I had to say and they want to hire me or buy my book. It could just be, wow, that was amazingly valuable. That's helpful. And so you really want to make sure as you're speaking on podcasts that you think about how can people get in contact with you, because people will reach out to you from hearing you on a show, which is amazing. And so for me, one of the things that happened is I had someone who just happened to be listening to a podcast that I was a guest on and was also planning a summit, right? Or like a speaker series. And because they heard me speak and being interviewed by someone, they said, you know what, I think this person would be great for my speaker series. And it was a series of something like this, like Facebook Lives, or live training, live speaking that was going to my ideal audience, that was happening all day. And I had an hour time slot to really be able to share my knowledge, my experiences, and my message. And so that's one of the things that I encourage you to think about is how can you leverage every opportunity? You can leverage somebody reaching out to you and wanting you to speak, and then you can leverage that speaking engagement to get more speaking engagement. So it's a big game of leverage. So that's number one. It's that ability to really become great at sharing your knowledge and experiences on a platform like a podcast, because it allows people who are listening to go, wow, this is valuable information. I know my audience is going to want to hear this, whether it's for a virtual or in-person event. And next thing you know, you're being approached by someone who is looking to book you.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the point of just looking at podcast guesting also as a way to really hone in your message, because for a listener who's looking for a speaker to book for their event, for their virtual event, for their summit, they want to know that that speaker hits the nail on the head. They have exactly the expertise that I'm looking for. And that takes practice, that takes consistency, that takes honing in your message again and again and again. And that's what you get with podcast guesting. Every time you're a guest, you're honing in your message. You're getting better and better at sharing your story and sharing your expertise every interview you do, which makes you easier and easier to book as a speaker.
Absolutely. And one of the things that a lot of people who are booking speakers for an event is going to ask is, what can you share with my audience? And so if you are perfecting your message, being a guest on countless podcasts, right? You're doing it over and over again. You start realizing, oh, okay, I'm saying this. This is the value I'm bringing. And you get clearer. And then you can articulate that really quickly to someone that's like, here are my top 3 points on this topic, or here are 2 or 3 topic ideas that I could bring to you and what I would share under each. That gives them an opportunity to choose which would be best for them.
Yeah, love it.
Yeah. So that's tip number 1. So don't underestimate the power of just being visible and being present and showing up on podcasts, because you never know who's listening. And I've absolutely been approached by people. Now, the second way is in that vein, or in that in a similar area, which is relationship building, right? And so what's happened to me is I've been a guest on someone's podcast and built that relationship and rapport with the host. And so there's a podcast, I was a guest on that podcast. I love the host. I had them as a guest on my podcast. We stayed in contact, and it's not like we talked every day, but we'd like each other's post on social media, or, reach out and say, hey, is there any way I can help you? What are you working on? And so building that relationship with hosts, especially those that you truly resonate with, is key, because what ended up happening is, I think almost a year after I had been a guest on their podcast, they were launching a brand new annual summit series. And they were like, hey, I'm thinking back to our podcast episode. You shared such amazing tips. I think it would be really great for the summit. Would you like to come and be a guest and speak on this platform? And I said, sure, absolutely. And so it's in being in a relationship with the co-host or the host of a show, not a literal relationship, but you know what I mean, guys? Like, you're building relationships.
Professionals.
Yes, exactly. A business professional relationship with hosts that allows you to, one, if they're working on something, to have you be someone that they think of. And number 2, if they are speaking at an event, this has also happened to me, where I was staying connected with someone who I'd been on their podcast, and they reached out and said, actually, I'm going to speak at this event. You should apply and like I'll put in a good word for you. And so things like that happen as well, because when you're thinking about it, people who are podcast hosts have a podcast for a reason. They're doing their own level of visibility. So those are the people that you want to build relationships with, especially if they're speaking on a similar topic or their topic is in alignment with yours, because they might have opportunities that you want to tap into. And I even have a newfound friend who's a podcast host who said, you know, she only is looking to have repeat guests on her show of people she really liked. And those are the same people that she recommends for other opportunities. And so being one of those people is huge.
Yes, relationships are everything. I remember years ago, one of my early clients at Interview Connections was Michael Stelzner. I booked guests for, he had a Parenting Adventures podcast. And I remember in talking with him, he told me, you know, he runs in a really big conference, social media marketing world. You know, it's thousands of people that flock to San Diego for this conference. So huge stages, really amazing speakers. And he told me, and he shared this publicly on his show too, when he is booking speakers, they need to be on his podcast first. Like that's how he makes sure, like that's kind of part, it's not like an official audition, but he did say like, I go to my podcast guests first when I'm looking for people to speak. So, and I've heard other people that too, when they get speaking opportunities, it comes by being on that event organizer's podcast.
Absolutely. Because again, it's almost like an unofficial interview, right? That vetting process. They know that you have something to say. They get a sense of your energy. And I have yet to have a podcast host not do this, but usually before they hit record, you chat for a little bit beforehand. And then if that goes well and the interview goes well, you probably chat a little bit afterwards. And then you send them a note and you stay connected. And so that relationship really does help you when it comes to speaking.
Yeah, I know you, like I've gotten speaking engagements like in person at conferences, and I've bypassed like the application because I have a relationship with the host. And let's face it, I run a podcast booking agency. All of my relationships have come through podcast guesting in some shape or form or fashion. So when you really build relationships with people that are booking speakers, like it's a simple text like, yeah, Rose, you can speak. Like literally I got that text and it was like done. So yeah, got a lot of experience speaking on podcasts. Build your relationships with podcast hosts, with people they connect you with. Relationships get you in the door.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And my third tip is actually one that I wish more people did. So if you are listening to this, get booked on podcasts and then do what I'm about to tell you, because it's the thing that usually people forget about. And it's strategically leveraging and marketing your appearances on podcasts. And this is why it's so important. There's two reasons why it's really important. The first is that when people associate your brand as being the expert, like your personal brand, you are the expert on a topic, and they constantly see you speaking on different podcasts, maybe guest writing or being featured in articles, maybe you're speaking at different stages. It helps people go, wow, this person must be amazing, must really know what they're talking about. And I keep seeing them and they keep staying top of mind. So I would like to book them on a show. And so I've had people who didn't go to the podcast that I was a guest on because they were, active listeners of that episode, right? It's because I kept promoting different episodes that I had been on. And even one of my friends does this thing, which I think is amazing, where they will do an annual recap or a monthly recap of all the shows that they've been on and create this cool graphic. And so it really shows, wow, you've been on a lot of shows, you've done a lot of things. And so people can see that whether you're posting it on LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram, and they see it. And then when they're thinking, I need someone for this opportunity, you come to mind because they constantly see you are actively speaking and doing things. And so that alone is huge.
Yes, I love that, Nikki. And I also think there's a really powerful tip in there as well that I heard, in that, like, a lot of times I'll hear people are getting on podcasts. They're like, I'm getting on podcasts and I want to get speaking opportunities. But the shift in language of like, I am a speaker right now, I'm speaking on podcasts. And I want, like, just, you are a speaker now. If you're going on podcasts, you are a speaker now. And then it's only a matter of time, as you're leveraging and implementing all these tips you're hearing from Nikki, that then the stages and the platforms in which you are speaking expand.
100%. And I think that when you come from that perspective and that approach, it opens doors for people, right? It changes the game. Like I'm a big part of my career has been in content marketing. And the thing that's interesting for folks is that I say content marketing and people automatically think social media marketing. And I'm like, no, like that's a form of content, but so is being on a podcast, so is speaking on stages, so is writing a book. If you are taking your intellectual property or your knowledge and experiences and somebody else can hear it, can read it, can watch it, that's content to me. And so what you're really doing, if you take that similar approach to speaking and you're like, if I'm a speaker because people can listen to me speak, they can watch me speak. It doesn't matter if it's a podcast or a Facebook Live, right? I'm a speaker right now. This is me speaking, right? Like
you are speaking. This is a speaking opportunity. You are here speaking. Like embody that, because I heard this on a podcast today, actually. People will see you as you show up. So when you show up as a speaker, they're going to see you as a speaker. And like, if I'm organizing an event, I'm more likely to want to book somebody that's already speaking than someone that's like, I'd really like to be a speaker. It's like, just be the thing you want to be. And then it's so much more likely that you're going to expand the number of opportunities that allow you to speak.
Absolutely. And the other thing you can do in terms of this leverage in marketing is actively seek out speaking opportunities. And when people ask, have you been a speaker or can you share an example of you speaking, share a podcast episode, right? Like share, here's what I'm going to speak about on your show. Here's an example of me speaking about it, right? Those things help. And whether you're teaching a workshop in somebody else's mastermind or community, I've had those opportunities. Whether it means that you are speaking on stage at someone's event, I've had those opportunities. Whether it means that you are speaking virtually to somebody on a Facebook Live or an Instagram Live, I've had those opportunities. You want to think, how can I leverage my podcasting to showcase that I can clearly articulate the value that I bring to the person that's doing the booking and decision making? And that's a huge game changer. Is even if you're applying for a speaking opportunity, link to you speaking on a podcast. Show them more than just telling them, I'm a great speaker. Like literally show people that you have what it takes to share a message, to bring your energy and your presence. And to be honest, doing it on audio is harder than doing it on video. So if you can do it through a podcast, then you can really show them, hey, I have what it takes for people to stay engaged when they can't see me. And imagine if they can see me, right? Like that's an amazing thing that you can bring to the table.
Amazing. Nikki, this is incredible. We have our next speaker in the wings. Where can everyone find you online who wants to connect with you and get more of your marketing expertise?
Yeah, so you guys can send me a message. I'm at Nikki Nash Official on pretty much all of the platforms. So that's where you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. LinkedIn, I'm just Nikki Nash, but Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, I'm at Nikki Nash Official. And I share more tips like this. So you can definitely reach out if you have questions.
Yeah. And Nikki and I will both be at She Podcast Live, which is a conference in the DC area. It's in Washington, DC in October. You can use the coupon code IC for $200 off your ticket. So go to shepodcastlive.com and come meet us in person. Awesome.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Nikki.
Thank you.
All right. Next, we have Samantha Varner. Hi, Samantha.
Hey, how's it going?
Oh, it's going awesome. Happy Monday. Thank you so much for coming on Facebook Live with us today.
Yeah, you're welcome. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So I have you here today. You have leveraged podcast guesting and the network you've built through podcasting to land a speaking opportunity. So I would love for you to share your story and any tips you have with our audience who are here to learn how to use podcast guesting to grow their speaking business. So go ahead.
Perfect. Okay. Well, I think my story is a bit interesting in that it's part and parcel of kind of the Interview Connections family. So my speaking opportunity came out of one of our networking events that we do monthly.
Yes.
And it was an opportunity where another client of Interview Connections had an event coming up. So Vina had an event coming up. She was looking for people to fill those speaking spots. And as I was lucky enough to be in the room when she kind of made that announcement, and I was very quick to put my hand up and say, hey, I would absolutely love to be in your event. I would love to participate in whatever way is going to support your growth in your business. and was able to go to her. So we did 2 different things. We did one-on-one interview style discussion that was broadcast out to the entire network that she had going on, as well as we did a panel. So I hopped onto that panel. She had 5 of us on there, and we had a whole conversation about doing it all and operating your business in that kind of context. So I think the number one tip I get from that is look at the network you currently have already in front of you, and don't be scared to throw your hand up, to put your hat in the ring when there's an opportunity, whether you know what it looks like. I mean, I had no idea what her event was going to look like. It didn't really matter. I was like, I could add value. I can talk about a topic most likely that's business related. And it gave me an opportunity to meet then the other 5 panelists, as well as expand my own network that way. So I think that's critical. It's like, look at who you already know that may know of or be hosting events and speaking opportunities themselves. I think we overlook that sometimes.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's so valuable. Like, you have so much gold in your network already. And then also, I love that you pointed out, you met Vina through the Interview Connections client network. So I just want to invite everyone to book a consult if you're interested in learning more about us booking you as a guest on podcasts. We host monthly networking calls where we create this space for our podcast guests to connect with each other. And a lot of our clients are running summits. They're having their own podcasts. They're organizing events. And there's so many connections that can happen when you get in the room of people that are out there doing it. They're out there speaking. They're out there looking for other people that are also speaking. And Sam, what do you speak about I didn't have you officially introduce yourself. So
what do I speak about? Anything you want me to. No, okay. That's I, as a profit coach, I really speak about business development and scaling your business into the revenue generator you're trying to create, right? So it's a lot of profit. We talk a lot about the numbers when it comes to things, but it also is the mindset and the growth and the development of your business to create that revenue that people are trying to generate when they first start their business. And sometimes those numbers don't come as quickly as we anticipate. So I help and talk about that on the regular.
Awesome. And where can our viewers find you if they want to book you to speak or have you on their podcast, or just learn more about your services and how you can help them with their profit?
Yeah, the best place is very much shecollective.biz, so .biz, and that's Instagram and also the website. So it's the best place to go. Alternatively, I host a podcast that's She Needs Grit. So you can find me on all of the podcast platforms as well if you want to hear what I talk about regularly.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Sam, for coming on and sharing how you're using podcast guesting and the IC network to get speaking opportunities.
You are so welcome.
Okay, bye. All right. And so now we're going to get into some tips that I have and also that come from Jacqueline Nagel. So Jacqueline Nagel is she's a good friend of ours. We met her through Allie Brown's mastermind group, and we did a speaker training with her. Margie has worked with her privately on speaking and crafting a keynote talk. And while she's in Australia, so she couldn't be here, I think it's about 3 a.m. for her, I did say, I will quote you. Do you have tips that you can share? Because she's an incredible speaker. So just going to share a little bit about her. So she's the founder of Any Given Tuesday. She is a speaker, trainer, mentor, advisor. You can find her at anygiventuesday.com. .au. And so some of the things that she had to say, she says she always, she trains and advises speakers. And she says, I always tell my clients to use podcast guesting to grow their speaking business. And she said there are 2 stages where podcast guesting matters for speakers. So number 1, when you are an emerging or aspiring speaker. So just put it in the comments if that's you, if you are if you are an aspiring speaker, like you're early on in your speaking business. You could be established in your coaching business or your consulting business, but you're early on having a speaking business. Let me know if that's you. Just put number 1 in the comments. Number 2, the other stage is when you are ready to level up after your message and your speaking career is established. So if you're regularly getting speaking opportunities, speaking gigs, like you're on stages every I don't know, every single month. Like it's a very regular thing and you're looking to level up. Let me know if that's you. That would be number 2. So let me know where you're at in your speaking business, because Jacqueline has some great tips for both stages. So first, I want to speak to the emerging or aspiring speaker rather. So Jacqueline says the purpose here is actually honing your message. And this is more important than building profile. You have to be in complete service to the podcast host, as this truly builds the muscle of being in service to your future audiences. So let's really dive in a little bit more to honing your message. What Jacqueline says here is too many people get on stages too early in their speaking career before their message is fully formed. The paradox is that you need to be in the arena to create the feedback loops you need to sharpen your message. And podcast guesting is the perfect way to do this and become powerful in your message, your storytelling, and understanding audience perspective. So I love this. And I want to echo this because this is something that we talk about, whether you are somebody that wants to be building your speaking business and getting on stages, which I'm guessing if you're here, that is what you want. Or maybe you just really want to sharpen your speaking skills so that you can be more effective on sales consultation calls, so that you can be more effective in future interviews you do, so you can be more effective in facilitating, meetings with your team. Let's say you're running a big team. Really honing in your message and your speaking skills is something that you get when you're consistently being interviewed on podcasts. You get that immediate feedback loop right away. The recording ends with the podcast host. And just like Nikki said, you're in that green room and you're talking back and forth immediately. Podcast host will immediately say, I loved this story. I love this. I mean, years ago, I share this story all the time. It happened a really long time ago, but I had a topic on my one sheet about mistakes podcast hosts make. I talk about podcast guesting and I got an immediate piece of feedback. What that was, I didn't really want to ask you that because if I made a mistake that you were going to list, I would have felt really embarrassed. And I'm like, great feedback, going to change that on my one sheet. So you get really important feedback loops that will help you improve and hone in on your messaging. So Jacqueline also shared a little bit about her criteria for podcasts. And this is a question that is very common when you're using podcast guesting. Let's say you're a speaker, perhaps you met our team at the National Speakers Association, and you're wondering, okay, what does a great podcast look like? What types of podcasts should I be on? Because there's over 2 million podcasts out there. So at least 20 episodes published as quickly as possible, and target is 50. And this is right in line with what we do with our clients. We want to see a bare minimum of 20 episodes published, 50 to 100 episodes published. Obviously, like the more episodes that are published, the stronger and more established that podcast is, and likely the better interviewer they are. Someone that's done 100, 200 podcast interviews, they're going to be a really strong interviewer and they're going to help you shine even better than somebody who's done 20. It just shows you how experienced somebody is. That being said, there may be podcasts like we talked with Nikki about how you can get speaking engagements through podcast guesting. Let's say if the host of the show is also organizing an event or is closely connected with a conference that you want to speak at. You may say, I don't care if they've got 15 or 20 episodes published. That would be a really important relationship for me to build. So these criteria are not black and white. When you are deciding what podcast to go on, you want to look at the whole big picture. And especially if you are working with Interview Connections, this is something we take into account. When you are our client, we are doing, onboarding with you. We're having monthly strategy calls. We're looking at your overall goal as a podcast guest. And if your goal is to grow your speaking business, we're taking into account number one, we want to look for well-established podcasts with interviewers that are going to help you shine. And also we're looking for podcast hosts where a relationship with the host will help connect you with speaking opportunities. So you want to look at, all of the factors that are going to help you reach your goals. Jacqueline also says she looks for podcasts where the host is publishing weekly, no less, and no more than 3 times per week. Because if it's more than 3 times per week, it's likely like a news style podcast. They might be inconsistent behind the scenes. So 1 to 3 times per week episodes published is ideal. Also, this tip is great. We obviously talk about this all the time. Use a podcast one sheet. So as a speaker, let me know if you are a speaker, do you have a speaker sheet? A speaker media kit, something, it may be a multiple page document as a speaker where it shows your speaking topics, maybe a little summary of what your speaking topic is. You might have testimonials of organizers who have had you speak to their audience. Great. So yes, the podcast one sheet would be, we would adapt it from your speaker sheet. So we would take some of your speaking topics, we would add suggested interview questions to your podcast one sheet. The podcast one sheet is not a place where we would put testimonials that could go on the media page of your website, for example, on your press kit. But the podcast one sheet is a one-page PDF that has your bio. So it's what a host would read to introduce you. So, you know, as a speaker, you want to have that introduction. Like if somebody's introducing you to speak to their audience, what do you want them to say? And I know speakers, we know it's important to make sure who's ever introducing you has a great bio, because some people can really flub that introduction. So it's the same thing with podcast guesting. You want to give a podcast host a great bio to use to introduce you. So that's really important. Use a podcast one sheet. By giving hosts a podcast one sheet and giving them your speaking topics, you are now setting yourself up to successfully talk about the speaking topics that you want to be booked as a speaker on at events, at in-person events. So if you're going on podcasts speaking about topics that have nothing to do with what you want to be speaking about at events, then there's a clear disconnect. So you want your podcast one sheet to really highlight your main speaking topics. Okay, the next tip from Jacqueline Nagel, and if you're just joining us, go follow Jacqueline Nagel. She was so kind in sending us these tips. She's a speaker, trainer, mentor. She's the founder of Any Given Tuesday. Always honor the host. Always honor the host. They are doing you a huge service by having you on their podcast. So honor them. You are a guest in their house. She says, spread the social tiles, use their hashtags, and share your favorite quotes and insights from the host, not your content. Share theirs. This is such a great tip. So what Jacqueline is saying here is get a quote from the episode that the host said and share that. When you focus on honoring the host and making them look good, that will in turn, that's the power of reciprocity. They're then going to want to make you look good. So I just love that tip. I've been doing this 9 years, y'all. Like I've been booking interviews longer than anyone. And whenever I hear tips like this, I'm like, oh, that's so good. Like there's so much value and expertise in our friends and our clients at Interview Connection. So yes, share tips from the host, really honor them. And that really speaks to what Nikki and I were talking about at the beginning of this Facebook Live, which is really building your relationships. Making sure every host that interviews you, the people you're connecting with through the networking that you're doing with podcast guesting, you're building those relationships and helping, shine a spotlight on other people. Remember to have a place people can connect with you afterwards and make it easy. Be ready to answer the host's interest in personally working with you. Pick your highest value, most magical outcome thing you do and answer that. So again, this speaks to how when you're podcast guesting consistently, when you're going on a podcast every single week, you get better and better at quickly and very effectively sharing what you do and how you help people. When there's I kind of do this and it's a little confusing, people are like, what are you talking about? But when you really hone in your message and you can quickly say how you can help somebody, you can very quickly and effectively maximize on the opportunities that these podcast interviews bring to you. And so what Jacqueline is talking about here, where she says, remember to have a place people can connect with you afterwards. That's what we talk about is the call to action. So at the end of a podcast interview, the host will give you that opportunity to share where listeners can connect with you. And you want to give that one place people can go. I just listened to a podcast interview today. I will actually tell you the episode because I loved it so much. I sent it to my whole team. It was Defining Moments of Leadership with Marsha Acker. She interviewed Sharon Ewan, and it was so good. And at the end of the episode, in the call to action, Shannon said, connect with me on LinkedIn. I went and connected with her on LinkedIn and I sent her a note. Like, it was very clear, one stop. We can now have a conversation in DM versus go to my website and like go here and all these different places. So have one clear place that people can go to connect with you. Especially if you want to be growing your speaking business, where is the one clear place that potential organizers can go to connect with you to talk about booking you? And for a lot of people, it is LinkedIn. I got a virtual speaking opportunity recently. The organizer of the event, September Smith, messaged me on LinkedIn. She has been listening to my podcast, so she heard me speaking about podcast guesting on my podcast. And that for her, she's like, I know you're a great fit because I've already heard you speak about this on podcasts. And she went and connected with me on LinkedIn. We got on a call and yeah, I spoke on her summit. So for a lot of speakers, it's actually driving people to LinkedIn to connect with you so you can immediately have a conversation. All right, now we're going to speak to when you're a more established speaker. So I know a couple folks put in the comments, number 2, so you're a more established speaker and you're looking to up level. So here are Jacqueline's tips for you. So really, you should Blitz podcast. So go on a whole bunch of shows when you're looking for new markets and audiences. So blitzing podcast, meaning going on a lot of shows in a condensed amount of time. So there's definitely a lot to be said for going on, 2 to 4 shows per month consistently. That slow burn, just consistent visibility. I'm a big fan of just always being on podcasts. I mean, we just got a prospect, somebody joined our Facebook group who heard me on a podcast that I recorded like 2 years ago. So you just always want to be getting out there because people would just consistently find you when they see those episodes. So you should Blitz podcast when you're looking for new markets or audiences. Podcast guesting is a really fast and easy and effective way to test new audiences and new markets. So rather than spending all the time and money on going to a conference or flying somewhere, you can go on a podcast and in an hour have a pretty good sense of that new market, that new audience. Also, you should be blitzing podcasts when you're ready to launch new IP. So books, programs, products, services. When you are launching something, going on a whole bunch of podcasts is a really effective way to get visibility to thousands of targeted listeners and potential customers. So when you're launching a book, we actually did a Facebook Live about this. It's on our YouTube channel. Just DM me or Sammy or Matt if you want the replay. If you have a book coming out, we have a whole training about how to use podcast guesting to promote your book. But again, if you're an established speaker and you're launching a book, podcast guesting needs to be in your marketing book launch plan. And you should be blitzing podcasts when you are wanting to increase your fees and the size of the stages that you're speaking on. And Jacqueline said, most importantly, have your entire digital footprint cleaned up. Make sure what you say you are and what you say you do shows up wherever someone can find you. And I love that she pointed this out because when you are a guest on podcasts consistently, whether you do a blitz of 20, 30 podcasts at one time, or you're going on, 2 to 4 shows per month over the course of 1, 2, 3 years, over time, those podcast hosts are linking to your website on their show notes page. And so when somebody's Googling what you do, they're going to see your website. They're going to see podcast interviews you've done. Your speaking opportunities will come up. So your digital footprint will really show all these podcast interviews that you've done. So that's just such a great tip. So again, those tips are courtesy of Jacqueline Nagel, founder of Any Given Tuesday. She's absolutely incredible. She has done a ton of media, and she's great. So I highly recommend you connecting with her, anygiventuesday.com.au. So again, just to wrap this up, practice your signature talk. When you are going on podcasts, you have the opportunity to be delivering the expertise, the stories. Let's say you have a new story that you're crafting for your keynote talk, go on podcast and deliver that story again and again and again and again. That is going to make you a more effective speaker, which is going to make it easier for you to get yourself booked for new opportunities. Ask hosts to keep you in mind for speaking opportunities. If you want something, you want a specific opportunity, you want something to happen in your life, you want speaking opportunities, talk about it. Make the requests, ask people, make sure it is known to everyone in your network and everyone that you're meeting that you are actively looking for speaking opportunities. And when you're a guest on podcasts, let's say every single week you're getting interviewed, every single week you're speaking with somebody that organizes a podcast, that is likely connected with people that also organize podcasts, that also organize virtual events, that also organize conferences. Every conference that I can think of that we go to, that we've been booked to speak at, they host a podcast. They're connected with people that host a podcast. A lot of conferences and events literally will have a media section of the trade show floor with podcasts. Podcasts are your digital way to get speaking opportunities. So you need to be leveraging them. Be consistent. We talked a little bit about blitzing podcasts and also doing it ongoing. This is something you would just want to add into your marketing strategy long term. And then lastly, you can use podcast interviews to create a speaker reel. So let's say you're number one, you're early on and you're emerging, you're an aspiring speaker. So you don't quite have a lot of speaking opportunities to create a reel from. Well, you can use podcast interviews to edit together a speaker reel because these are opportunities where you are speaking and you can showcase your skills as a speaker, as an educator, trainer, as a storyteller with the podcast interviews that you're doing. So you might be asking, okay, great. How do I get on podcasts? That is where we come in. So I am the founder of Interview Connections. We are the first and leading podcast booking agency. We have been doing this longer than anyone. We were the first to market in 2013. We have worked with literally thousands of podcast guests and podcast hosts. And we have tons of examples of clients we've worked with, podcast hosts we've worked with that can speak to the connection of podcast interviews and speaking opportunities. So if this resonated with you, if you are, whether you're an emerging aspiring speaker or you're a speaker looking to up level, and now you know after watching this Facebook Live that podcast guesting needs to be incorporated into your marketing strategy, I want you to go to interviewconnections.com. It's right here. /get-started, or just go to interviewconnections.com. If you don't know the whole URL, we'll get that link in the comments. You can go to the contact tab, you can go to get started, read a little bit more about our services and book a consultation call. We'll send you all the information about pricing. We have a couple different levels depending on, maybe you're somebody that wants to blitz. We have an option for that where, we can book you on 24 podcasts, 32 podcasts, and do that in a more condensed period of time. Maybe you're someone that you're like, okay, I've been thinking about doing this, but I've always had a reason to put it off. Then now's your time. What you want to have happen in your business, the results you want to create, the impact that you want to have in the next 90 days, you need to make decisions now. We had a business coach tell us once, and it's so true, that what's happening in your business right now is because what you did 90 days ago, what you did 6 months ago. So if you right now, August 1st, 2022, this fall, you want to be getting on stages, you want to be speaking, you want to be building your speaking business, you need to take an action today that is going to get you on that trajectory to building your speaking business. And if you're somebody where timing has always been your thing, you always have a reason why you've kicked this down the curb. You're like, I'll do this later. I'll go to this Facebook Live, but I'm still going to do it later. I am talking to you. Stop making the excuse that now's not the right time. You only got one life, okay? Now is the time. If you want to grow your speaking business, podcast guesting is a thing that you can do right now to take action that's going to get you closer to getting on those stages that you want to be speaking on. So what I want you to do, go to interviewconnections.com. You're going to fill out our very simple form so we can get to know you. And we'll get on a call right away so we can talk about what it looks like. As Sam Varner said, we have an amazing Interview Connections client network. So we have a private Facebook group with all of our clients where you can be connecting and building relationships. Every single month, I host a networking call for our clients where you can get to know people. As Sam said, one of our clients, Vina, organizing a summit, she looked for speakers first in our client network. So if you want to get opportunities, you got to get in the right room where people are first putting out the inquiry of, hey, I'm looking for speakers. I'm going to ask this room first. So we have a really amazing caliber of clients that are coming to those networking calls that we're working with. We have clients that will tell us, I'm looking for people to speak at this event. Who do you know? I'm looking for people to speak on my podcast. Who do you know? Obviously, we'll be booking you on podcasts. And you're also going to get strategy calls. So if your goal is to grow your speaking business, we will make sure that the podcasts we're pitching you to are aligned with your goal to grow your speaking business. So looking at the strategy of what types of events do you want to be speaking at? Who organizes those events? What do you want to be speaking about? Who can you connect with that's going to get you closer to those opportunities to grow your speaking business? So go to interviewconnections.com. Let's hop on a call and talk about what that looks like. Again, it's August 1st. The summer is nearing to an end. So the excuse of I'm taking the summer to relax, that is coming to a close. Now's the perfect time to get started with Interview Connections. We can take the next couple of weeks to onboard you and then be actively pitching, getting you booked. You could be speaking on podcasts next month when you start today. So go to interviewconnections.com, get in touch with us, get on a consultation call, because we want to see you on stages. We want to see you speaking and getting your signature talk out there as much as possible so you can have an impact on the world right now. So go to interviewconnections.com. We cannot wait to talk to you and help you grow your speaking business with podcast guesting.